It's recording.
Got it.
Welcome back to the Global Indian Series podcast, home to the greatest minds and conversations, and the official platform for open and liberal conversations. And let's face it, we are everywhere. As you know, every week we plunge ourselves into the human experience behind our perception of identity, taking a second look at the countries we now call home and tackling the big discussions. My name is Aisha Khan. I'm head of the Global Indian Series Oceania, also founder and curator of Gurmit Diaries. And today is our second episode looking at the key discussion, impacting the lives of our diaspora. Today I'm joined by my co-host, Rajan Nazar, founder of Global Indian Series, and Sandhya Dusk Devi Nand, photographer, writer, top model of Fiji, singer, radio presenter, and all-round boss. Welcome, Sandhya and Rajan.
Wow, thank you
I
very
was
much,
going to add an
Aisha.
auntie onto that one there, just for
Auntie, yeah, and general auntie, you know, the cool auntie. I'm the cool auntie. Thank you for that intro, Aisha. Hi, Rajan. Thank you.
Good
May I
morning.
just, well, before we, because just in something you said, Aisha, we are everywhere. That is for certain. We are also in the middle of the outback in Australia. When I've traveled extensively out back, and I have seen the names, and I have met Aussie as, and when I say Aussie as, just think of your quintessential Australian man, you know, the nut brown skin, it's got, you know, blue eyes, dark hair, and they're out there. Good day, mate. You know, they're out there. Good day, mate. I'm John Ali. I'm Steve Singh. I'm like, I'm on the floor right now. I'm what? Hey, so I just needed to tell you that we are definitely everywhere. We were out back in the 1800s. They were the traders. They were the ones who took, you know, the Afghans came in with their camels, and this is why our train in Australia is called the Ghan. And the Indians, the Singhs, all came in with their, you know, so the Alis, the Akbars, the Singhs, they're all here. Please, sorry to hijack you. Remember, brevity is not my forte. To cut me down.
And with that, good morning to everybody. No, that's absolutely phenomenal because so when you saw them, what was their story? Did you ask them why you here?
Yes, so one was Indigenous Australians and Afghan, you know, from Afghani is the not the proper term, Afghan, and their ancestors, and they're not recognized. Indigenous of Australia have still got there's still so much to go in that, so we won't really touch on. That's a completely different podcast that needs to be talked about, and I'm not sure it's our place to. But they're not accepted, and they feel they feel happier when they're out mustering. They're stockmen. They go out for 6 months at a time, you know, mustering the sheep, the cattle. But it's so insane, and they know who they are. They know that their ancestors came from India or Afghan, or, you know, it's fascinating. I'm fascinated by how urban Australia is in such denial about how it got settled. So there.
That's super interesting. Aisha, over to you because I know that you got a whole range of questions coming up.
All right, just before we start, a disclaimer. I am calling Sandhya by her name, not because I'm totally ignorant, or I'm not being disrespectful either, but because she won't let me call her anything else. I've asked her. So please do not come at me.
As I said, I learned from you. This is a circle of peers, and there's no, you know, it's all about equity. Age is only about equity of knowledge and experience lived. So let's go.
What does it mean for you to be Fijian, and what does it mean for you to be Indo Fijian? The two ideas or definitions intertwined, or are they separate?
Well, the first one's a loaded question, and it's always going to be a loaded question. And I'm not really sure any one of us can really answer it. You know, in its simple form, it's someone from Fiji, but it's never that simple. Identity politics, we know nothing the world over is that simple. What does it mean to be Fijian? It means we're from this dot on the map that I have described before as a microcosm of the world. So for me, coming from Fiji means that I have been able to step out of my metaphorical doorstep, literal sometimes, and meet someone from China, meet someone from Germany, meet someone from, you know, Rajasthan or down south, or it's quite a fascinating mix to come from Fiji, to be and to be Fijian. That's a political question, which I suppose we'll get to later. To be Indo Fijian means something else entirely to me, and it's something that I my memory got jogged because I have written about it before in a post and a photograph you have used to just boost my ego on Instagram. Thank you. For me, it means that I can be as Indian as I want. It's not discouraged to not be Indian in Fiji. You can be, our festivities, our traditions, our national festivities, they're national traditions. Everyone, roti is our national food. Curries are our national food. It's to be Indo Fijian means that I wasn't limited to just one identity. I am of Indian ancestry, but well, I'm a product of colonization. I'm a product of capitalism from an old point of view. But either way, it's created this unique identity where we really are connected to all parts of the world. I don't feel limited to just being Indian. Oh, gosh, that sounds. I didn't practice this answer because I wanted to know what my psyche would answer, how it would answer this. So here you go. It just means to me, I feel global. I feel globally connected without having to leave my ancestral connection behind. I'm very much Indian. I very much feel it, but I'm so much more evolved. Is that the word I'm going to use? I'm so sorry. That's not necessarily what I mean in terms of like a hierarchy. No, not at all. Just I'm able to adapt. If for one, that's being Indo-Fijian means a whole lot of things to me, and I know that I'm really grateful that I was born in Fiji and not in India, and not because, as I have written before, not because of India's patriarchal hypocrisy in that regard, but because of what being born in Fiji has given me, that we're at the end of the world. The international dateline cuts right through us, so technically we're the first country in the world, and we're the world. It's the world there, and I love it. I love that as an Indo-Fijian. I can also say that part of my culture is other races' traditions. It's part of my cultural background as an Indo-Fijian. I understand other races' protocol. So I get very emotional about this. So I'm trying not to I'm trying not to gush about it. So
no, that's awesome. That's amazing. Going off what you said, there's this general notion that India, or the idea of India, is the motherland for the descendants of indentured laborers. Do you feel like you have a motherland? And if yes, where is it?
No, I personally have not felt that motherland call, but I absolutely understand why Fijians of Indian ancestry or Indo-Fijians feel that way, because of the displacement, because they're not welcomed, because they were torn away under false pretenses, and then they were lied to about being welcomed. So they left their country, thinking that they were being welcomed into another one. And of course, naturally, it'd be like, oh my goodness. And they were given options to return on their own coin. We won't go into the government history. I mean, I can't go into the government history with the founder of Government Diaries, so I'll just leave it to you to explain all that. And as I said, I'm learning from you. It's the motherland connectivity is just about, well, then what are we? Who are we? I personally have not felt that connectivity because I'm Indian here. Gosh, that sounds like a cliche. Just to go off topic a little bit, back in the 2000s, I was a face of the Hallmark Channel of India. And the tagline was, without drama, there is no life, or something. And that made me laugh very much so. But I'm Indian here. I'm Indian in my connection to the history of the world. It's being from India doesn't make me Indian. I'm of Indian origin. That sounds naive. And I don't expect everybody to adopt that. I'm not saying this is the law. This is my law. It's my story. It's my law, L-O-R-E. It's just I don't feel that connectivity. I really felt very full and whole in Fiji because I still had, the pundit would still say that this kanya is, whatever this. So I still had access to these real deep things, and of course our theology and our mythology. We had the best comic book store in Suva, so all the Amar Chitrakatha comic books. Wow, you know, for an Indian kid who was brought up in Hinduism, that is just like, this is, oh my God, my superheroes. You know, it was wonderful to learn all of this through this beautiful way of doing it, which actually got children interested in learning about all of this. And what we came to understand, that it was all just moral fables, and Hinduism, what I came to understand, was just all these faces of godliness. And I loved all of that. What was the question? I'm sorry. I'm sorry. So yes, that's I hope that answers some things. That I don't have that connectivity. I love India, love it. I have driven around. Yeah, driven. It's like, hey Ram, please, you know, just don't take me here, not this way. And I've loved all of that. Beautiful. And I loved, you know, going there and all the fallacies that are said about Indian men in India and all that. It's just, you know, yes, there are problems world over. India is a country of 1 billion plus people. Naturally, their problems are going to be amplified. But to say that everybody is tarred with this brush that you know, brushes the entire world is ridiculous. I love India, but I only feel connection in the way, I guess, white people go, oh yeah, we're from Europe. They don't feel connection to their Black ancestors. But anyway, so that's it. That's it for me. My motherland is really, I was born in Fiji to my mother who was born in Fiji, and that's it. That's it.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing. You've said on Instagram,
I do think, if I may just say so, I do think it's privilege as well that allows me to think that way.
Yeah.
So just if you want to ask me about that later.
Well, I was going to say, why is that? In what sense?
Of the accident of birth, which Rajan, you know, we all talked about at another time, and just I was born to opportunity and a family that was high profile, and in that way I was because I was also kind of weird, because I was a product of a few different environments at that stage as a child growing up in Fiji and teenager. So I was allowed to be out there because I was an anomaly. So personally, I'm an anomaly, and I know my privilege in my background and where I grew up and where I lived in Fiji. If I may just, I mean, I guess this is, you know, I grew up in my house. My family home was in the whitest place in Suva. My father, an Indo Fijian from Nandranga, you know, with his brilliance, somehow or the other, and I have to acknowledge this, even though I have to personally, there's a few things about him I don't really want to talk about, but he got to, and we lived opposite the British High Commissioner's residence, overlooking Albert Park and the Grand Pacific Hotel. From our home balcony, I could see the Queen waving and I'm thinking, what's the big deal? Why are we all, you know, I understood back then that the Queen was just coming to, you know, survey her cattle, really, you know, on her then crown land. So that wasn't a thing for me. But that privilege allowed me to be a bit wilder, because she's not the typical, you know, whatever. So I used it, and by being as Indian as possible. So one instance in this case was when I was reading the news for television, when I first started reading the news, if I may go into that. I insisted on wearing a sari against a Masi backdrop. Masi is a pattern, a traditional pattern that is painted on tapa cloth, which is from tree bark. And for me, that was, it may have come across as a political statement of rebellion, but it was, for me, just a simple message of unity, really. I'm reading the news for, you know, the people here, and I'm blessed to be here because I'm a well-known loudmouth kind of thing. I don't know. I'd been on radio for many years before that. So for me, that's just, yeah, that's it. Sorry. That privilege allowed me.
Leading on from that, I know you've spoken about your privilege, but do you feel it's easier for Indo-Fijian women now versus then, considering the cultural, societal norms and just the judgmental aunties? Is that something that you've dealt with personally?
Not easier.
Harder?
Not harder either. It's more frequent, more commonplace, particularly with the advent of social media. I mean, I look at some of these young women on Instagram like, hey, Ram, oh my God, you know, there's the auntie in me coming like, oh my goodness, stop it. Oh my God, you know, I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm like this. I mean, I think it's fantastic. I think for me, in terms of feminism, which is a completely different topic to this, but for feminism for women of multicultural backgrounds, that's we use clothing. You know, Western clothing becomes some sort of part of our identity politics. So I'm seeing it a lot in the way people dress in Fiji now. You know, it's like, the skirts are really short, except I know I wore really, really short skirts. And this is the crazy thing, I used to be a model. I still am, you know, repping the old brown menopausal woman. But back then I was wearing a sari, you know, interviewing high profile, you know, or senators or politicians and stuff on television and having that credibility. And this is freshly post-coup, first post-coup coups Fiji, early 90s. And then I'm on a runway in the skimpiest of bikinis and no one bats an eyelid. In fact, it just raises my profile, and somehow it never ever affects my credibility because we were so desperate to be seen as progressive that we actually were. We fooled ourselves into being progressive. So that's that for that.
You've said that post-coup Fiji was, you know, being Indian in post-coup Fiji was akin to walking on eggshells.
Ooh,
is it still that way for you, do you feel?
No, I'm the anomaly. I'm the weirdo that is allowed to get away with things. I still know not to push a protocol. I am very culturally aware. Older people are. One thing the old regime has cut away in a misguided attempt at equity is the hierarchy within the indigenous Fijian community. And that has created a sense of, well, there's a lack of protocol, which sounds awfully formal. I certainly don't mean it that way, but a lack of courtesy and respect. The younger people they really do look at the older people as dinosaurs instead of accepting the knowledge ladder that happens because of it. Ask me more about that question again, because I'm just thinking ahead of that. My apologies. This is what I shouldn't do. So I should. What can you just prompt me on this question again? My apologies.
Basically, you said that post-coup Fiji, being Indian
Eggshells.
in that environment,
The eggshells.
was akin to walking on eggshells. Were you
okay
personally affected by it, or did you see
Well,
the effects?
yes, I was, but but more in the upper levels, and certainly more from the whites of Fiji. Not so much from the indigenous Fijian myself. If I can go back to the news reading part of it and the modeling part of it, my biggest fans, my biggest supporters to this day are indigenous Fijian people. They would, you know, I think they couldn't believe the audacity, and then because they're also big personalities. They're big-hearted personalities. There is on the lower level, there's no real understanding of why any interracial hatred exists, or why they're supposed to hate people. And the questions don't get asked about that either. There's a lot of under the rug sweeping going on. No matter. Eggshells, yes, certainly everyone has had to. We have to watch how we say the things we do, because automatically we are then lumped in this basket of troublemaker. International media still portrays anything that happened in Fiji as trouble created by the Indo Fijians, rather than, well, the true source of that trouble being the colonizers and how it all happened. So the eggshells, oh gosh, I think this is with the last regime, the government that has just been that just lost. They made it easier for Indians to speak up, but they weren't necessarily happy with what was being done to create this fallacy or this false sense of security. Dictatorship, I don't know, is that peace? You know, forced peace. I mean, it's I do need to say this, I'm not religious. I feel that I personally don't require God to be good, and I feel that this government was playing God in that sense, that no, you are going to be fair and equal because I will kill you if you don't, kind of thing. Well, I'm not, didn't do that, but you know. So eggshells back then, early 90s, woo, okay. 1989, no, 2 years after. So that's going back to my modeling debut when I was 18. Good Lord. It was the most prestigious show in Fiji. It was the Hibiscus Fashion Show back when the Hibiscus Fashion Festival was like that bomb, the best show ever, the best event ever. It was really, really good. But again, I'm going to bring something up about that. There was never an Indo Fijian hibiscus contestant, and we all said this behind the scenes, like, oh yeah, she's not going to win, whatever, So we knew these truths amongst us. It's just becomes part of the urban myth, but the urban legend of the country. Hibiscus Festival, 1989. Now, there was a huge scandal back in the UK at that stage. It was akin to the Profumo scandal, Christine Keeler and all that stuff. This time it was a woman called Pamela Boards, and she was, Pamela Singh, really, but she brought up the name Pamela Boards, and she's full Indian, but at that stage she said she was half Indian, blah, 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 and she was an escort. And yes, she was, and she was with a minister, and again the Profumo scandal for the late 80s happened. So my first runway, I walked out, and it's the most prestigious one. I've been handpicked by the designer of Fiji, the legendary Tanya Whiteside from the legendary Tiki Togs, and the producer, the creator of our modern day fashion industry in Fiji, which is about 50 years old, 60, around that. And so, it's like, great, I'm fine. But as I go out, wow, I get called Pamela Boards. I get taunted with all these names, and it's not by indigenous Fijians. It's by members of the society that are predominantly white and what we call Kailoma, which is mixed. And they didn't know what to make of this Indian girl who didn't know her place. And she's, because, it's everywhere. I grew up here, kind of thing. So eggshells, that's when I refused to walk on them. I sort of did that whole Hema Malini and Shorley thing. Do you remember this? I don't, when they Gabbar Singh's man throws all those bottles in front of her, and she's dancing and saving her man. Well, that's what it felt. It felt like, okay, call me Pamela Boards. I will walk on those glass shards of your Pamela Boards, and that's what happened to me. I was defiant in that, because I did not understand how, in a country that I had naively grown up with, in relative harmony, although there was a lot of political tension in the background, and of course I absorbed all of it as a child and young teen. But for me personally, the eggshells have you've got to be really careful. Now I'm going to say something really contentious here. My accent, I think, really helped in terms of my privilege, in terms of how I was perceived. Because if the colonizer is seen as God in a country, then the product of that colonization is also going to be somewhat treated well and revered.
Demigod, absolutely.
So but the mistake that was made is that I have gone over to the dark side and bringing some Jedi stuff into here. I'm a Star Wars freak from way back, so please. So that's what it may have been for a while, because people insisted that I wanted to be white. Why you sound white? Why are you trying to be white? What? I've actually, you've never left Fiji, and I grew up in England and a little bit in the then Bombay, so I don't know really what you're talking about, but this becomes this ownership of once they see somebody else applying what they're supposed to be. This is race dynamics. This is it. So I understood where all of that was coming from, and it was water off a dusk's back, if you want to call it that. I can't believe I said that. I'm so sorry. That is just so bad. But the eggshells, okay, so that's just me. My privilege didn't actually made me open my eyes more to what was actually the truth. My privilege didn't shield me. My privilege opened my eyes more, because I was the one getting discounts. I was the one getting the jobs. I was the one who was excused and given the badge of approval. You're not like the others. And I'm like, what does that mean? Because I am. Just the way they speak is not an indicator of how they, the thought processes that go in, or their identity. So the eggshells I saw was walked by upon by everybody else. I danced on them like Hammer.
But I guess just to interject though, you've also the privilege is that you are in a place of influence. The fact that you're seen on TV, you're on radio, which means if I was going to run to fave to somebody, it's going to be somebody like yourself rather than the average Joe that's on the street or the average singer that's on the street. Because my hope is, okay, if I'm good with her, she's going to be good with me. If I'm good with her, she's going to do a bigger favor for me. I guess that's where some of the privilege is from in that mindset, because it's rather than just, yeah, and that's quite interesting. But I should go on because I'm really excited in the silence. I'm watching it like a kid in the candy store. But it is really fascinating. It's truly fascinating. Sorry, Aisha, I'll interject. Go
on. No, it's all good. Just going off of what you said about your accent, Sandhya, I know that you were a radio presenter. What language were you presenting in? And did your accent help?
Yes, absolutely. English. But okay. I was only on the radio, English radio channels, but I would just go into all the Hindi channels and sit there and buck with depending. But back then it was the India Hindi that was on our radio channels, not the Hindi we speak in Fiji. So I was on the English channel, and I think that, I don't know, for some place, I know that 25 years later, 30 years later, I have young people who are a bit baffled, and they look at me and they go, I swear I watched you on television as a child. And I'm like, oh my gosh, can you not talk to me right now? But tell me more. So I don't know. It's very, look, I'm joking about it, but it's very humbling. I'll talk about that later if you want to pursue that, why it's humbling for me. And but it goes back to the influence you said, Rajan. So I was on radio, on English radio, and it was, yes, I feel it did, because it made everyone feel comfortable. And going back to what I said about the privilege of the way I sounded because of my upbringing, being brought up in England, and I did adopt. I was a baby when we went there. And so, of course, I grew up with an English accent. That made me an anomaly. And also, back when we were in India for a brief time, it was just, it was like revered. It was so odd, people, how they perceive, you can sort of step back from yourself and go, oh my gosh, this is how people perceive you based on what your exterior, you're projecting. So yes, but I also would do things like just, play Hindi music on English radio, because I at one stage in mid-90s or late 90s, my show was called Brunch to Lunch, and it was a topical show, a talk show. So I talked about various things, and feminism and racism, etc., anything I could. But I would also start off my show with a Guns N' Roses "Welcome to the Jungle" song, and I'm not sure how I got away with some of the things I did, but I did. And well, not for long. I did get taken off radio after a year because they complained about this, we need to have easygoing music in the morning and we can't be too contentious. I'm like, okay, that's not right. But I was on English radio. I was accepted. I was listened to because of, I didn't put anyone and I couldn't be made fun of, other than, is she putting it on, a type thing. Like, if that's what you want to think, that's what you want to think. That's fine. When white people in Fiji who are white from Fiji would say to me, your accent, where do you get that from? I'm like, I'm not asking you where you get your native accent from. And I say that only in regards to the white people of Fiji. I'm sorry, but there is a local accent that is it's heavily #island life. And I'm like, it's a bit much, guys. If I wrote this script, I wouldn't be writing that accent, I gotta tell you. So yes, I was on English radio. It was a lot of fun. I did a lot of outside broadcasts. I did a lot of fun things, and I value it. And we got to learn how to be, a producer. Back then, we didn't have producers for us. There was no, we had to, oh my gosh, the things we had to do. We had to, get this cart out and blah, 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 blah. It was multitasking like this. Hello, we're back on air now, blah, blah, blah. And it's just behind the scenes. I'm like, music. It was so great. And of course, when I was 18, the radio station was like 2 minutes walk from the most popular bar. So I would, I can't believe I'm admitting this. I would put on I don't know, 30 minutes of music and go and visit my friends. I'm so sorry. But I did. And I would be dressed in a sari.
I
You
feel
know,
like
right?
this is a confession tape now, isn't it? So there's like confessions of a radio producer.
It's like, whoops, because there was a back door to that studio. Oh my Lord. I'm so glad that I'm
But it
51
seems
now.
like there's quite a few different identities at play in Fiji. You said that you have the hashtag island life type
Mm,
of identity. You have the Indian nurse. You have the native nurse, if I use that as an expression.
mm.
And all of this type of kaleidoscope leads us up to say, well, what does it mean to be Fijian then?
Exactly.
Especially now, because
Yeah.
I think what Aisha's mentioning is you had a coup. The coup was a deadly coup, and the coup leader has now coming back into power. Now you can't write that in a script. That's almost for a lot of people, if they wanted to associate something, is almost looking in a way to Idi Amin in Uganda. Obviously, slightly different, but in the mentality of the South Asian experience. What does it mean to be Fijian? Honestly and truly, what is that identity? And because I know, remember Aisha asked you earlier, before we got on the show, saying, are you Fijian? And you said, look, I struggle in terms of answering that. So run us through that part.
I don't feel I have the right, either through political, the you know, the stipulations, because I feel it, but even I stumble. It's like my neck tendons tighten and I can't take it out. I have been referred to that way in the media by indigenous Fijian journalists, and I got to tell you, it's just, excuse me a moment, and you've got to take a moment to compose yourself, because it's very emotional to be called that by someone, by an indigenous Fijian. Now there are young people who are saying, excuse me, I have a right to be this, to just identify myself as that way, in that way. I am from here. There's nowhere else I'm from. And they're a bit more vocal about that. But I can't, I have said it on paper, but I try not to read it when I'm reading it back or something. It's just, because it still comes with the stigma that the Indo Fijian wants to control Fiji. It still comes with that if the Indo Fijian wants to call themselves Fijian, it's because they want to own it and run it. And unfortunately, the people who have come into power, who are of Indian ancestry, are just not good ambassadors for the rest of us. And they create this segregation. It becomes even further. I'm not articulating this well, because it is still a very emotional thing for me to contend with, to confront, because I am Fijian. I'm a product of Fiji. I walk on that land there, and I'm connected to that flora. Suva is in my blood. It's in my DNA. My mother, it's my father. Everything. It's. I can't not be it. But I'm not allowed to call myself. And even, sorry, Aisha, even though the previous government says, no, you're free to call yourself anything. That's why we're going to now classify as the indigenous as the toke, which is a very contentious word, I have just found out, if you want to talk about identity politics. But I'm going to leave it there. Aisha, you wanted to.
Oh no, I can relate.
Yeah,
I feel like I have roots in two countries, in New Zealand, where I'm born and raised, and Fiji, because that's where my parents are born, and that's where my great-grandparents worked the land, and they probably planted a lot of seeds there. But I feel like I don't really have a right to go back and like sit under the shade of the tree, basically, because it's not my tree, even though they planted it. So if I had to sum it up, that's how it feels for me.
Why, I suppose.
It is basically what Sandhya just said. All of that put together. Like, it's hard to explain, but I feel like my childhood home, like, it's here in New Zealand, but a lot of childhood memories are in Fiji. It's like on the terrace of my grandparents' house that I'm not gonna have anywhere else. Like, I feel a lot of pride when I see that house, because I know my family has built that bit brick by brick, and it wasn't easy. But there's still this sense that it can be taken away from us. So
it's tenuous.
The ownership part of owning something, I feel that here in New Zealand. I don't feel that in Fiji,
That's
even
really
though the
interesting.
emotional connection is there. Yeah.
I have in Australia, I feel a bit because I have I feel solidarity for the First Nations people of Australia. I still have issues with the whole owning of the land that wasn't ceded. So I have, but with Fiji, that land was ceded. We were not we were not colonizers. But why are we still apologizing for our slavery? You can call our ancestors indentured laborers. We know that that was just a polite term for a system that had been abolished and they still needed their sugar sweetened, you know?
Yeah.
So, but we're still blamed for this. Like we went and touched that land and you cannot call yourself, it's sacrilege. And for us, Indo Fijians, particularly because we were the ones, or our ancestors toiled that land and touched that land. And that is the thing, because the white people didn't physically touch that land. They just took it. The Indians toiled it. And there's something there. There's something there for Aisha to not feel she has any right to go and sit underneath a tree that her ancestors toiled. It all guts me a little. So, you know, so to a country that I feel I have been a good ambassador for so far. I feel that I don't, you know, in terms of contribution, and if I mean anything, I don't know, we can, you know, but I feel and so for both of us to feel this displacement.
Well, I think it's remarkable because it's again coming down to present circumstances. How do you both feel as intentionally Fijians? How do you both feel that you have this current head of state in power, especially when you both would have grown up hearing those stories and you would have seen it on your side of the as well? He created a coup, and that coup was, as one of your Twitters were, it was a very anti-Indian coup. It was about the other. And now all of a sudden you have something like that saying, actually, I'm uniting the country. Don't worry about the past. The past is the past. But now I'm here to unite us all for a future together. But come on, you've done something that is almost arbitrary to death penalties that you provided people. Like, can you believe that message? And what does that speak about national identity?
Do you want me to go first on that one? Yeah.
Yeah,
Flip the
sure.
coin,
Go
yeah?
ahead.
So are we talking about what has the actual fact that our new that the Fiji's prime minister is the very man who instigated the first coup?
Absolutely.
Now, I think in the elections time, right now I'm seeing it, but I just need to give some background here because on Facebook and social media, etc., I didn't realize there had been such an embargo on free speech in Fiji. Because right now my Facebook feed is, you know, fired up with people just saying what they want about the government and how it affected them. I was only aware of certain academics like Professor Bridge Lal, who was not allowed, the late, Professor Bridge Lal and his wife, Dr. Padma Lal, who were not allowed to go back to Fiji because they were just absolutely loud, vocal, you know, against this government and its tyranny. So they were not allowed to go back home. So I'm aware of those things, but I had no idea just how bad it was for the average, for want of a better term, citizen of Fiji, where they were not allowed. Yet when I was there last year for 3 months, I asked everybody. I needed to reach some sort of, you know, well-researched opinion as to this government, because from what I could see, there was a lot of things being done that seemed like, well, this is helpful, but that's the privilege of not being on shore, right? That's the naivete of that privilege. And yet there's a lot of people saying, no, we get this, we get free, we get this, we get this. But there's a lot of people who are just like, I think what the problem is that there was a lot of pockets being lined, and there was a lot of nepotism, or you know, association nepotism, and actual nepotism happening. And so this is really, it's not good, because it's further sullied the Indo Fijians' reputation, the stigma we all carry, like, oh my God, please don't do that. It makes the rest of us look bad, because every single Indo Fijian, regardless of where they were born, becomes an ambassador for Fiji. And prior to about 20 years ago, I will tell you this, in Australia, the Indo Fijian was looked down upon as an overstayer or something like that. They couldn't quite place me because it didn't sound like an overstayer. And I personally came here on a business visa from the Australian government. Again, privileged, because I was what I was in Fiji. And so this was in the 1990s, by the way. And now with Rabuka coming back into power, Mr. Rabuka, first of all, everybody was like, well, better the devil, kind of thing, but better this devil already, who is just really a tyrant, an absolute tyrant, because Mr. Rabuka was prime minister in the 90s, between 1992 and 1999, which in my mind, because I was there and it's my lived experience, Aisha, Rajan, I used to be put on the front page of the Fiji Times right next to Ratu Mara and the PM, Rabuka, and I was in a bikini, and I'm like, gee, thanks. Which one of us is selling this cover? Thank you very much, though. Thank you. And it's quite, so interestingly enough, my husband said to me, because I had said something, and he said, well, wouldn't it be interesting? It's almost like we're going through a reset. Maybe that's happening. Maybe that is what is happening, a reset. So it was always better, well, the devil, and, whatever. But I've come to believe that who better than to fix it than he who actually broke it? But also he was part of a bigger picture ploy, a bigger picture game being played, that those politics, those racial politics have been around for a long time. They were in the 70s. It was just boiling and bubbling under the surface, this need and greed for territory, not necessarily country. It's about territory, because it's a very tribal culture that we are all part, from. So, of course, before the actual colonizers, before the British, before the Americans got there, the tribes were fighting amongst themselves. So it is very territorial. And even though the winning party of the 1987 elections that caused the coup, even though the leader of that party was indigenous Fijian, it was still seen as an Indo Fijian win. And that's, but I feel that look, people change. People do change, and you've got to give that benefit of the doubt. Sometimes I think there is an urgency, and I don't think we can. But no one else has stepped up. And if the indigenous Fijian, the younger ones, and this is where identity politics comes into, and where what I said earlier about the name Tokay being used as an identifier for people of indigenous background from Fiji. These people on Twitter, they don't live in Fiji. They're not even, I don't necessarily think they may be born in Fiji, but oof. They hate being called Tokay, which they say, which I have been told, is an abbreviation of a longer word, which means of the land, native. Now, to my plebeian ears, I feel that sounds romantically lovely. And of course, you're of the land. Is this not a good name for you? And it's absolutely abhorrent to them. They are indigenous Fijians, that's it. And no, they will not be classified underneath anything. Fijian is indigenous Fijian as far as these young people are concerned, which scares me, because they're supposed to be the future, and they're still so heavily in they have such a lack of identity that they will fight for an identity that should not exist anymore.
I think that's what the dangers are, isn't it? It's identity politics for identity's sake. And it's that quest for personal validation. I should feel on your side. How do you feel? Because again, when you think about the coup, it was anti-Indian, essentially. Importantly, is what kind of led Fiji down to this roadmap of where we are in present day, where the fact that somebody can write something on Twitter about what it means to be Fijian and get a barrage of abuse. And you spoke about being able to sit under the tree of your grandparents. Now, this is a guy who wanted to get rid of your grandparents.
Yeah.
How do you feel?
I don't feel like I can say anything, really. I don't live there, but I still feel a fear that maybe something might happen to me if I say something. And it's almost
absolutely
like
wow,
an irrational fear almost, because I don't live there, and there's no like practical reason for me to be persecuted when I'm a New Zealand citizen. But
you could be
still
barred, because apparently there was a blacklist before for the last 16 years of people who were not. I was constantly terrified I was going to be.
Wow.
Yeah.
So is it more about the politics, or is it about the person?
It's a politics. I don't know how I feel about him, and him being back in power, apparently making all these efforts. I don't know how genuine he is, basically, and I think only time will tell. But I am ready to kind of give him time to do whatever it is that he's planning to do, and yeah.
So do you want to add in
Sorry, Aisha, I didn't mean to. It's for me personally, I feel that as he's getting older, he's an older man now.
Yeah.
He has apologized. I feel he really is, he's genuine in his apologies for what he did. I think he understands that that was something that really just some of his other policies that are quite progressive until he announces them. I'm not publicly, I guess I'm not going to mention anything, but from things I understand from talking with people. I don't know if his party has the best interest of Fiji. I don't know. I think he has, but one person is not the party and one person is not the government. And this is the problem as well, because now we've got coalitions, we've got some power plays happening. We've got to make the Professor Biman Prasad, who is the leader of the National Federation Party, part of the coalition, is a kind, quiet strength, gentle man. Is he going to be dynamic enough to stand up for the Indo Fijian of today, who has the right to ask for recognition on this land? We don't need to own the land. This is what I'm saying about territory. It's not about territory. It's not about physical land. It's just recognition, acknowledgement, acceptance, not tolerance. What's this tolerance? So it's okay. It's blind hope, and that's even in Aisha's answer. It's hope. It's hope that please be right. Please. They've given you this thing, and they're all free. Fiji Times is now able to publish whatever it wants without fear of being persecuted and given, jail time or whatever. People can actually say certain things. There's a lot of revelry on the ground. You see, people are partying, etc., and are really feeling like, okay, something's happening, because the Rabuka government has gone in and they've started. They're getting I have always had an issue with how expats are brought in, white in particular, expats are brought in to run the country. They're the head of the Tourism Fiji, they're the head of Fiji Airways, they're the head of all the big things, to this day. Now, I can get it, 80s, 90s, when they still needed to sort of train people. Now, thank you, we've done it. But now it's still very much an expat's heaven in terms of getting all the big positions. So, and these are all political appointments. These are not personal, not corporate appointments, search engine, headhunted. These people, these are political appointments, and now the Rabuka government's gone in, and they're cleaning this stuff, and they're finding out some ridiculous things, and that people always suspected and always knew. So there is action, and this is currently uniting everybody, and it's great, but there is that fear, like, okay. But then now there's people I haven't really seen the cabinet. I haven't seen who's been allocated what portfolio, who's the minister. The permanent secretaries have all been invited to reapply for their positions. A majority of them are Indo Fijian. There are Indo Fijian people in positions of absolute credibility where they need to be. But it's still this hope. It's still just, we're all just going, okay. So I kind of understand anger from other people, say not the non-resident indigenous Fijian, anger from anyone else who might say to me, Sandhya, shut up, don't rock the boat right now. But they also understand that that's always been my role. And
I suppose this is the moment to rock the boat, because you want to know, are you on shore sand or not? Because you're rather, because the thing is, I suppose when it comes to politics, the business of people, this is now the business of generations. This is legacies. This is people like Arsha who's saying, well, actually, shouldn't I be Fijian? Shouldn't I feel that I'm part and participant of where this country is going to? It's about legacies. And you got a guy who essentially came in, okay, the past is the past, but we will not forget. But a guy who essentially came in, he changed the very scope of national identity. That's a huge thing. And now he has the opportunity to almost right the wrongs, but to create a national brand where people are coming together. Wow, you need more than just expat help. That is a real change of mindset. I think this is the first of many more conversations to come. That is my feeling. I know that there's a lot of great things planned together. But I think there's one part of me that is incredibly shocked here. It's saying, how much do we really know about this paradise island? The fact that now things have changed. And yeah, in all sense and purposes, for us guys sitting here in the United Kingdom with our very posh accents, obviously with horse and chariot at the front door as part of bourgeoisie, when we think of Fiji, you think sun, sea, sand.
Yeah.
But you don't think of all the other things that a lot of the South Asian experiences have faced. And now this is probably one of the most vital times in Fiji's history to see where it's going to turn. It's on that edge of a mountain, so to speak. Leaving it to you, Aisha, to wrap up, because this has been absolutely exciting for me this morning. I didn't even need a cup of coffee.
No, and you are up so early.
So before you wrap up, the last question is, do you think you mean something to Fiji? And what is your advice to the youngins?
Oh, well, that's such a loaded question.
Come
Whoever
on,
came up
Auntie.
with that
Answer the
question,
Auntie.
whoever
Answer
came
the
up with
question.
that question, Roger. Okay, I could be cliche and say that's my hope, and I would really like that to be my legacy. But I'm going to be really bold and say, yes, I mean something to Fiji. I do, and I'm seeing that now. And I never expected it, although back then I knew that anything I did was for. I'm a big picture thinker. And even if that wasn't wisdom back then 30 years ago, if that was just some sort of sense of drama, like I would like to leave a legacy, so be it. Because now to be, if I may recount a quick, now that doesn't, the stories don't mean anything about being recognized, but what I was saying earlier about how humbling it is that 35 years later, I can still be recognized by people who grew up with me, or I haven't been in the public eye completely for the last 2 decades. I've been in and out. I haven't saturated their media like I did back in the 90s, I guess. My gosh. And it's very humbling. So do I mean something to Fiji? Well, I have to say yes, because if I'm on the phone and I'm just talking to a customer service assistant and they go, "Excuse me, ma'am, are you Sandhya Nand?" I mean, what am I supposed to think? I'm like, yeah, I am. I used to listen to you. I speak the way I do because of you. What am I supposed to think? What am I supposed to think when I get off the flight of one of the best landings I have ever experienced? Captain Singh from Fiji Airways, you were a genius. And I told him that. So this was last year. And I was at the carousel looking like roadkill. Okay, it was a packed flight and I've got hat on, mask on, COVID germs flying all over the place. I'm like, back away from me. I don't look like Sandhya Nand, okay, is what I'm saying to you. So I get, and then I see the pilot and I'm like, I must tell him what a wonder, this was the best landing I've ever experienced. And I went to say that and he looked at me and he just said, "Are you Sandhya Nand?" And I'm wearing glasses. How do you know this? And I think I recounted this story and he said, you got me through school. I'm like, I don't want to know further, but thank you. How can I not say I don't mean something when there are young people who have no idea of they weren't alive when I was prevalent, when I dominated the saturated whatever, and yet they feel some sort of connection with me. I resonate with them because things I say they understand. We connect on all these levels.
Sandhya, because you are part of that Fijian identity for many people out there. Yet you're squirmish about saying I'm Fijian, and that's it. Aisha, on your side, obviously Fiji means something to you. Do you mean anything to it?
Do I?
Yeah.
Yes.
Because
No.
this is what the government's trying to do. They're trying to say, let's reach out to everybody. Let's get everybody feeling that they're part and participant of the future. But for you, how do you feel?
No, I don't think I mean anything, really. I don't think I do. I'm not trying to be like humble about it or anything. It's just, I don't, like, besides paying an airfare and contributing to like the economy by being a tourist, I'm really not. I think whenever I go, I make sure to pay my respects to my grandparents who aren't here anymore. So to them, I am their legacy. I'm their legacy. I'm their grandchild. And that's pretty much it.
May I answer that question too
Sure.
objectively about Aisha? I think so. I think maybe not now, Aisha, that you don't feel it, but I really, really hope you get to feel it few years from now because of what of Gilmet Diaries and all of this and this information. Somebody had to do it. Somebody had to do it, and it's a big job. And it's emotional, and it's physical, and it's everything, and it's, you know. So yeah, I think so. I think I absolutely believe so. And you know, I've said that to you. So for me, you do.
Thank you. And
so
before we wrap up, may I just add that as someone who's grown up kind of searching for the adequate representation, somewhere I didn't realize that it was always kind of right in front of me. And maybe because I've grown up in New Zealand, I was not fully aware of your impact. But now in my mid-20s, I feel like I can say I can stop searching now. I think I found it.
Whoa.
Wow.
Whoa. Whew.
You know, over time, I've had people reach out to me on Instagram, and they've seen you sharing my posts, and they've said, you know, oh my God, it's so cool that Sandhya Nand, like if I can swear, Sandhya fucking Nand is sharing your posts. And they share these stories on me of how they've like grown up watching you on the runway and what like reading, like listening to you. And I'm like, wow. So you've been very supportive from the very beginning, and it means a lot to me. So thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to make you emotional.
I feel like
I'm an old woman, Aisha. I'm, you know, menopause. I'm like, you know, thank you. I don't know what to, I'm sorry. I don't know how to answer any of that.
No,
thank you.
It's fine.
How does that feel to you, Sandhya?
Sorry?
Because how does that feel to you? Because again, it's obviously it's an impact, isn't it? Do you feel that now you have almost an added duty then? Because people looked at you towards the past of this, what this Fijian culture is. Now you're almost entering back into that. Are you a new voice for this generation who's saying, well, we're searching for a sense of belonging, but we also want to have a sense of fairness of what it means to be this country?
I have never stopped being that voice. I may have left it, but I didn't stop being an unofficial ambassador for the country and showing that, well, this is what I am me because of that, not because of any other thing. So for me, I feel I'm a really good example of Fiji. You know, there are many of us. We're not there because, well, we needed to expand and grow to our full potential. I really don't know. I'm quite emotionally struck by that. But yeah, I don't know. I'm sorry. I do feel it is an absolute responsibility for me. I just wrote this yesterday, actually, and as it's coming out of me, I absolutely believe this. If I'm only, because what people say in Fiji, oh, it's only Fiji, oh, it's only Fiji, who cares? It's only Fiji. And I don't think that way. If I'm only famous, but for a small percentage of people in Fiji, that's more than enough. They've held me in high regard, and I don't take that regard lightly. So for me, the fame I have because and from Fiji and because of Fiji is a huge responsibility. So I make sure that I show, it's cliched, it may be, you know, but it's very much how I believe. I am going to every step I take is just expanding a platform so that more people can be on it, because I do feel the platform is a continuous expansion, and the more of us that are there by merit. And if I really can make someone look and go, well, you know, I can do this. I can do this, and I don't have to compromise who I am. I don't have to stop being Indian. I don't have to be completely, I don't have to adapt and fit into this society and discard my identity. I can have all of that and just and be the product of this.
And it's kind of what
everything.
We said before. It's just an arbitrary factor of skin color. It doesn't define who we are. It just happens to be part of who we are. You know, our gender, it doesn't define, it just happens to be who we are in this human experience of it. So then if we hold on to it so tightly to say this is all of us, there's something fundamentally wrong there. But I think this has been a fantastic conversation. We've covered a lot here. I felt like we went through a whole Bollywood movie, didn't we? We ended up with emotions, the tears, the whole lot.
But epic soap opera.
That's it. That is it. Well, Aisha, Sandhya, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
Aisha, thanks for taking the lead in this on your second voyage for the Global Indian Series for the Oceania side of the world. And again, the first of many more conversations to come.
Yes.